I'm Dean Memminger. Here's your Spectrum News in 90. With about 100 days until the 2024 election, Vice President Kamala Harris is vetting candidates to be her running mate. She is expected to announce her pick in less than 2 weeks. Harris received a major endorsement Friday from former President Barack Obama and his wife.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
As for Donald Trump, the former president met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Friday in yet another high-stakes meeting. It's their first time meeting face-to-face since Trump left the White House. In a statement, Netanyahu thanked Trump for his policies during his presidency and says Trump pledged to bring peace to the Middle East if re-elected. The 2024 Paris Olympics are officially underway. Athletes from all over the globe paraded in boats down the Seine River during the opening ceremony Friday. More than 10,000 athletes are taking part in the Games. That includes nearly 600 U.S. delegation at the ceremony.
In this moment, we are more than our cities or states or backgrounds. We are all, first and foremost, Team USA.
And those are your headlines. Now, your weather on the ones.
Hi there, I'm meteorologist Robert Santos tracking another round of showers and thunderstorms for Saturday morning coming across the south and eventually spreading across into the southeast. Temperatures during the day, Saturday, 80s and 90s. The hotter temperatures out in the southwest, you can see there in Las Vegas and Phoenix in the triple digits. And on Sunday, not much change. Some of that warmth already beginning to spread across the Midwest. So we'll be in the mid to upper 80s there in places like Milwaukee and Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Welcome to The Big Deal. I'm Errol Lewis, national political anchor at Spectrum News. Every week, we bring you some of the biggest issues shaping our nation and the road to the White House. It's been a historic time in the race for president, with Election Day just about 100 days away. This week began with President Biden announcing he'd be suspending his re-election campaign, instead backing Vice President Kamala Harris. On the Republican side, former President Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, held his first rally in his home state of Ohio, just days after the Republican National Convention wrapped up in Wisconsin. But the big deal this week is Harris quickly consolidating Democratic support for her presidential run as she prepares to clinch the Democratic nomination. Here's a look at the week.
Weeks continuing to unite our party so that we are ready to win in November.
Nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition.
Kamala Harris and the rest of the Democrats lied about his ability to be our president.
Lion Kamala Harris has been the ultra-liberal driving force behind every single Biden catastrophe.
These extremists want to take us back, but we are not going back. We are not going back.
Joining me now to talk more about this is two top political analysts. Alex Cohen is a political anchor at Spectrum News 1 in Southern California and has covered Harris for years. Jason Fechner is an anchor for Spectrum News 1 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Alex, Harris would become the first woman, the first black woman, and the first person of South Asian descent to win the White House. She only got her position because of her race and gender. But of course, her career is much, much more complicated than that. Tell us a little bit about where she comes from.
Absolutely. She is a prosecutor through and through. She began her political career in San Francisco as a deputy district attorney. She went on to actually challenge her boss. Many people thought there was no way she could beat him, but she did just that. She went on to become California's statewide attorney general. And then when U.S. Senator Barbara Boxer decided to retire, Kamala Harris ran in that race and was successful. Of course, many folks will remember she ran for president herself back in 2019. That campaign didn't go so far. She even clashed with President Biden during a debate. However, she wound up being Biden's vice president in a really extraordinary position at this exceptional moment in time.
Okay, now, Jason, earlier this week, Harris held her first official campaign rally in your state, in Wisconsin, where she was met by an energized crowd. And it turns out her husband, the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, is heading back to Wisconsin this weekend for a campaign event. It seems like this ticket sees a path to victory that runs through your swing state.
Errol, great to see you. This race has definitely changed, but the math has not. There's a reason that Vice President Kamala Harris has now been to Wisconsin roughly half a dozen times since the start of the year, and that Doug Emhoff is on his way this weekend as well. And it's for more than just the cheese and the beer here, which are delicious, by the way. I worked through a number of hypothetical electoral maps over the last couple of hours here, also at realclearpolitics.com. And you work the puzzle, you move the game pieces around, and it still comes down to that blue wall: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. If this race were held, Donald Trump wins and wins big. But if Kamala Harris can get Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania into her column, hypothetically, she ends up with 270 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 268. Just imagine that finish line potentially down the road there. And with that, of course, Kamala Harris becomes the first female president in American history. So a lot of visits to Wisconsin. We anticipate a lot more in the weeks still ahead. Okay, so now, Alex, we've been reporting on all of the endorsements and the delegate support that's been piling up this week for Kamala Harris pretty quickly, including the most recent one from Barack Obama and his wife, Michelle. The Democratic National Convention, though, is actually a formal process. Walk us through what actually needs to happen for this nomination to be completed.
That's right. They actually held a meeting online that the public was able to watch earlier this week, kind of talking through what is the best path forward. It really seems like Kamala Harris will be the nominee, but wanting to make sure that this doesn't appear to be a Camelot or a Camelot or a coronation. They said, look, let's create a window. If anybody else wants to step up and throw their hat in the ring, we'll give them some time to do so. We're in that period right now. It doesn't look like that will be the case. So most likely what we will see is ballots cast right around August 1st. Of course, there's a key element that is missing in all of this. When you vote on a ticket, which is both the presidential nominee and the vice presidential pick as well. We have heard from Kamala Harris's team that they're expecting to do that by August 7th, which is right about the timing that we should see this nomination selection process. But I've been in touch with delegates here in California who were originally pledged to Biden. They've actually gotten, it's all through Google Docs and PDFs, but some of them sent me screenshots of like, look, I did it, I showed.
Okay, very interesting. And now, Jason, let's talk about what is going to be, I guess, the main drama between now and the end of the convention, which is the contenders for a running mate for Kamala Harris. The names that are getting a lot of buzz include Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, and the governors of Pennsylvania and North Carolina and Kentucky. Who are you keeping a close eye on?
Well, Errol, as you mentioned, there are a lot of names still out there, of course. Andy Beshear, Roy Cooper, Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary. But I think you nailed it there. It's pretty much down to Senator Mark Kelly there in Arizona and Governor Josh Shapiro in the great state of Pennsylvania. And I'll tell you why. Let's start with Shapiro, of course. If the goal of the Harris campaign right now is to lock up that blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, you've obviously got to have Pennsylvania in the mix, and it has the most electoral votes of all those states at 19 out there. Shapiro, relatively popular in his home state as well. I think his approval-disapproval ratio there around disapprove. So a relatively popular governor. I'm sure that the thought is he should help to carry his home state across the finish line. Then jumping out to the southwest with Senator Mark Kelly, of course, in Arizona. He's also got ties to New Jersey and to Texas as well. More name recognition across the country, a former astronaut, of course, and a pretty middle-of-the-road Democrat if a lot of people are criticizing Harris for more progressive slants in her policies there. The old JFK line, a rising tide lifting all boats. Could Kelly help in a number of these states, Pennsylvania included, to help carry those across the finish line out there? My hunch is right now this is based on zero reporting, just kind of a gut feeling. With so little time left until we get to the November election, of course, I think that focus is on the blue wall. I think Shapiro potentially is the pick if they really want to nail down those three states.
Okay. Thank you for that analysis. Thank you, Alex and Jason. We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll dive and get into what ongoing research can tell us about the health effects that are linked to this important pollution source. Stay with us.
Spectrum News Plus. News from a new perspective, dedicated to refreshing storytelling and empowering communities across the nation. With balanced reporting, providing real context and in-depth coverage 24 hours a day.
Here's a look at your forecast across the country.
Local stories, connecting communities. We are Spectrum News Plus. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
At Spectrum, we know their dreams.
My dream is to become a video game developer.
My dream is to get my online college degree. That's why Spectrum has affordable solutions to keep you connected. At Spectrum, we are committed to delivering reliable, affordable internet and unlimited mobile to keep you connected to what matters most to you.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt accomplished, made me feel that I could take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
When I was in foster care, I moved, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
We're back with the big deal. I'm Errol Lewis. In recent years, concerns have grown surrounding microplastics, the tiny particles of plastic that can be found all around us, in the air, in our blood, in our lungs. We are constantly through the water that we drink, through other beverages, through seafood, and food that's processed with water. Now, while scientists still don't have a clear sense of what this is all doing to our bodies, plastic pollution continues to pose a serious threat to the environment. And that includes the Great Lakes, which provide drinking water to millions of people throughout the United States and Canada and are home to thousands of species. Every year, 22 million pounds of plastic are estimated to enter the 5 lakes. And according to a recent study, 90% of lake water samples taken over the last decade contained microplastic levels deemed unsafe for wildlife. Spectrum News reporter Dana Damiani visited a new research center in Rochester, New York, that studies the life cycle of microplastics in the Great Lakes ecosystem.
A ball, maybe? A hospital band? Condiment pack?
Different forms of plastic.
This is a piece of a Rubik's Cube.
Lake Ontario.
There's 25,000 storm drains in the city. So if this is what's in one drain in 2 weeks, you can imagine how much is really entering through stormwater.
Dr. Christy Tyler is a co-director of the Lake Ontario Center for Microplastics in Human Health, a research center supported by a $7.3 million grant to study the life cycles of microplastics and how they move in the Great Lakes freshwater ecosystem.
Plastic breaks down in the environment. And I think we hear that plastic lasts forever, and it degrades really pretty slowly, but it does break down. So once it's out in the environment, the UV radiation from the sun, waves in the lake or the wind, they start to chemically and mechanically break it down.
Dr. Tyler's students at the Rochester Institute of Technology spearheading the environmental breakdowns of microplastics for the project. Under water and soil from the Lake Ontario samples to see just how many microplastics are in the water we use every day.
We filtered them out. We filtered the samples out onto a gridded filter so that we can see what we're looking for.
Size, shape, and color. All identifiers Professor Edding Sauce has trained his eyes to look out for.
Plastics is not just one thing. There are many types of plastics. And we need to know, A, is it plastic? And then B, we want to know what type of plastic do we have. This white piece has a good chance of being a plastic fragment that's going to there. So it's kind of white, almost clearish but you can see how it's more jagged.
We're dealing with this influx of plastic at the same time that we're dealing with climate change. And so that's what we're trying to understand is how do those interact, and then how is it going to affect us and our health?
We know that they get into organisms, we know they get into our bodies, but we really need to put those pieces together. So it is really scary to think about the amount of plastics that's coming into our bodies.
Questions turning into answers at the University of Rochester Medical Center.
We're essentially going to be taking some of the tadpoles, and we're going to have a treatment group where we expose them to some UV-stained microplastics. And then we're going to have a control group that isn't exposed to any microplastics.
Plastics less than 5 millimeters big, already proving a much larger issue for human health.
We know that they impair the immune system, so we know that already. We also know that some plastic that have been going in the liver can stay more than a week inside the liver.
This one is an intestine.
We're really trying to look at what type of mechanism is involved.
And we, as humans, we're ingesting them, inhaling them, getting into dermal contact. We don't want to wait until we figure out it's carcinogenic and everyone is dead before we do something about it. So it's
Nadamiani, Spectrum News.
Joining me now with more on the effects of microplastics is Spectrum News national health reporter Errol Billups. And Errol, we're in this race against time that's a little scary in part because we don't really know what the effects of this are. How do microplastics affect wildlife, and more importantly, how do they affect our bodies?
Yeah, so microplastics are used in so many things that we access, whether it's the bottles that we use for shampoo and personal care products, to fertilizers in farming, to the bottled water that we drink, and we ingest it. It's also leaches into the water supply that animals drink, and it gets into their bodies, and then the animals we end up eating also have microplastics in them, and so it bioaccumulates, which means the presence of it grows in the body, and the microplastics or the nanoplastics even can actually enter our bloodstream and start to mimic hormones, and then start altering our endocrine system, which is the system that regulates our hormones. So we're seeing some things like, reduced sperm count in men. Some are pointing to microplastics as maybe causing Parkinson's or impacting why we're seeing these growing number of cancer diagnoses. So because it's altering how our hormones react in the body. But again, this is just the very beginning. We've only just learned, science has only just had the tools recently to measure these micro and nanoparticles.
So as the scientists try and find out more about what all this means, how can people minimize their exposure to microplastics?
It is really overwhelming, but I think what people can remember is that it accumulates, right? So you can choose your exposures and you can choose to minimize how much, because it's ubiquitous in our world. But you can do things like avoid highly processed foods because there's lots of plastics in the processing. Avoid heating plastics, so don't microwave your food in plastic containers. Try not to store your food in plastic containers. I have stainless steel and glass containers that I store my food in. I don't even use plastic shower curtains because the shower curtains get warmed up by the hot water, if you like hot showers. Drink filtered tap water, vacuum regularly because, the microplastics can be in your rug, in the air, you want to get that up. And avoid plastics with recycling codes 3, 6, and 7. There are some plastics that are okay. They're bio-based or greenware or made from corn. It's not as bad for you.
Well, we're going to have to also think about this from the source, right? Is there any federal action to deal with the amount of microplastics that are being produced?
It's happening, but it's happening slow. Aware of it because as the body of science and research grows, there have been Senate congressional hearings on it. There was a executive order pushing the EPA to do some more work on this. They're trying to figure out how to improve post-use material management, prevent trash and micro and nanoplastics from entering waterways. But it's slow going because we've been using plastics in our world for so long to kind of turn that around. It's going to take a little while.
Okay, sounds like there's something for everybody to do. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on it. Thanks very much, Errol. We're not done just yet. Coming up next, we will break down the Israeli Prime Minister's visit to Capitol Hill. Stay with us. Here's the deal. In this election year, people need a place to explore national issues that have an impact on their community. To understand those issues better, we're bringing together our team of local political journalists from across the country to break down what's happening. So join us every week to catch up on the key stories making a big difference across the nation and in your local community.
Watch The Big Deal with Errol Lewis Friday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all of your favorite devices exclusively on Spectrum.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
I don't remember how it started.
What's that?
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
We are back with The Big Deal. That was Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who delivered a fiery address to a joint session of Congress this Wednesday. Netanyahu went on to defend his country's war in Gaza and vowed to press on until what he called a, quote, total victory. Netanyahu's speech was boycotted by dozens of Democratic lawmakers on Capitol Hill and protested by thousands outside the chambers. Throughout his visit, Benjamin Netanyahu also met separately with President Joe Biden, with Vice President Kamala Harris, and with former President. This means is Josh Robbins, Spectrum News chief national political reporter. And Josh, we are currently in month 9 of this war between Israel and Hamas. Do we see any signs of progress in Netanyahu's speech, and how is he handling the politics, not just here, but also in Israel, where they are calling for him to wrap this whole thing up, right?
Well, some people are calling it, and some people are saying that total victory needs to be complete and total victory, whatever that means. That's a topic for another day about that amorphous line. I think that his speech moved things forward in the sense that he got to come to the United States and present very clearly his point of view. It was applauded by about half of the people in Congress, and he met with what's all in likelihood to be the next president of the United States, either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. As for whether this is moving things forward, there are negotiations that are set to later in the weekend or next week in Rome. I do not want to get too far ahead of that because we have been here before where we thought there was going to be progress and there wasn't.
Interesting. All eyes are now on Kamala Harris and how she's going to approach this war if she should become president. Yesterday, she spoke with Netanyahu and then gave a statement. Let's take a listen and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Let's get the deal done so we can get a ceasefire to end the war. Let's bring the hostages home, and let's provide much-needed relief to the Palestinian people.
Calling for a ceasefire, asking for the hostages to come home. What is she signaling about how she plans to handle this issue, at least on the campaign trail?
She's signaling that she has empathy for all sides, and that's something that people feel was lacking from Biden to the Palestinian side, or let's say was not in enough supply. It would be much different than Biden, but she's showing empathy to the real human toll that this war has taken. Now, We could spend hours and hours discussing how devilishly complicated it is there, that the civilians in Gaza, according to the United States' own intelligence, are held hostage essentially by Hamas, who their leaders have known to praise the casualties. So at least rhetorically, she's showing more empathy, and that might be music to a lot of people's ears, at the same time alienating other people, but I'm not sure they're going to vote for a Democrat anyway.
Netanyahu did meet with the Republican former president. What do we know about how Donald Trump would handle the conflict if he becomes the next president?
Well, he's been vague. He's said that Israel needs to finish the job, but also has noted that it's suffering in its PR war. He said that actually for a long time. In his remarks today before the press, with the prime minister talking about how bad Joe Biden was for Israel and how good he was for Israel, and indeed within Israel, he is credited for moving the embassy to Jerusalem and recognizing the Golan Heights. But Biden is also quite loved there for coming not long after the October 7th attacks.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much, Josh. And we thank all of you for joining us on this edition of The Big Deal. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned to your local station.
At Spectrum News, we're committed to strengthening the fabric of local communities through our reporting, with stories that inspire and news that matters. Streaming live on your smart TV and connected devices, plus on-demand weather forecasts. It's all there as keeping you informed and in the know throughout your day. Spectrum News Plus, local stories, connecting communities. Exclusively for Spectrum customers. Now available on your favorite devices.
At Spectrum, our workforce of over 100,000 employees are all located right here in the U.S. You can find them in our stores, in the field, and in our call centers with 100% U.S.-based customer service. Our team works hard to provide the towns, cities, and neighborhoods they live in with the reliable services that everyone counts on, making us one of America's most trusted companies. We're Spectrum, creating jobs and opportunities across the country, and proud to be 100% U.S.-based.
Today I'm going to talk to you about physics. Come on in, girls. Let's go. This is the first rocket to get humans to Mars.
Really tall.
I'm a rocket shark of the rocket. You are the generation that will be stepping foot on Mars. Do I have a group of astronauts on my hands?
Yes.
You can become a rocket scientist or whatever else you want to be.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Never gonna let you go.